Hey there, it's been a while, but now I'm finally back with another overcomplicated nonsense we didn't know you need until now. So join me today as we are going to push the limits of Figma again by building a parallax effect. Here's how it works on the high level. We need to know the cursor position and then shift each layer of the image by a certain value based on that position and layer properties. How hard can it be, right? Okay, this is our usual empty frame. But we are not gonna draw things on it right away. First, let's set up some variables. To begin with, we wanna know the dimensions of the frame, so we could reference them in our expressions later. Let's call them frame width and frame height. Give them some values and apply to the frame. Keep in mind that now you can only resize the frame by changing the variables, but not the other way around, as the link breaks when resizing manually. Also, we need the cursor position, cursor X and cursor Y variables correspondingly. Finally, let's create layer-specific variables. The first one is strength. It's basically a multiplier that defines how much the change in the cursor position affects the movement of a parallax layer. And of course, to be able to manipulate the layer position, it should also be linked to variables. Let's call them layer X and layer Y. But there's only one layer, and a parallax image consists of multiple. So select these last three variables, group them, and call it layer 1. Then duplicate it as many times as many layers you'd like to have. But not too many, of course. The system has its limits. I created 5 for this example. And don't forget to rename them. The parallax strength increases from the center to the sides. So let's find this center by dragging horizontal and vertical guides. They will automatically snap to the center of the frame when you are close to it. We can use them as axis of the coordinate plane, where the center is 0 and values go through it from negative to positive. But unlike in math, the y-axis should be inverted, simply because of how the flow works in Figma and frontend in general, from left to right and from top to bottom. Also, I find it quite useful to display some variables on the screen for debugging purposes. In this case, we only need cursor X and cursor Y. So I created 2 text layers and assigned those variables to them from the Properties panel. But you can show as many variables as you need. With all that in place, we can finally create the tracker. Basically, we need a grid, where hovering over cells returns their coordinates. But assigning interactions for each cell is a lot of work. So, to keep my sanity, I'll use a trick from my previous video. With this trick, I can separate horizontal and vertical coordinates, which dramatically reduces the amount of interactions. Let's start with the horizontal position. Create a vertical frame, aligning its left side to the guide we created earlier, and set its constraints to scale. Now we need to calculate its width. I found out that roughly 30 columns is enough for parallax to work well enough, while not being too hard to set up. You could use smaller columns for smoother experience, but that will require more manual work, which you'll see in a minute. So divide the width of the parent frame by the number of columns, and this is the value we were looking for. In this case, it's conveniently 48 pixels. If you got a decimal value, just round it to the nearest integer. Go to the prototype mode and add a while hovering interaction with a set variable action. Select the cursor X variable and in the expression field, type this. What does it mean? We know that the part in the parentheses equals the width of the column, but instead of using the constant value of 48 pixels or whatever value you are using, we are calculating it dynamically. This allows us to resize the frame, which affects the column width. As for multiplying it by 1, it's just my attempt to optimize the following process. Duplicate the column multiple times until it reaches the right edge of the frame. The new copies appear above the original frame in the layer list, but it would be more convenient for us to work with if we reverse the order. For this we can just select all columns and wrap them in auto layout. Also, I'd recommend renaming them according to their position in the list. You can easily do this by pressing Command or Ctrl R and selecting ascending numbers. Now select the second column, go to the expression and replace 1 with 2. Press Tab to go to the third one and change it to 3. I guess you see where this is going, right? Yep, you need to change it for all columns. And the name of the layer will help you to know which number to use if you're lost. If it sounds like too much work, you can just grab the file I made. I put the link in the description. Also, it works much smoother due to the higher grid resolution. I've spent quite some time building it, so give this video a like if you find it useful. And subscribing would also really help this channel to grow and do more stuff like this. If you're still here,
you're breathtaking! You're all breathtaking!
And we can actually test what we just did. As you can see, by multiplying a column by its index, we can find how far it is from the center. It's time for parallax calculations. Select all columns and add a new expression. Choose the layer x variable of the first layer as the target. In the expression, multiply the strength of the first layer by cursor x. And that's basically it for this layer. Now you just need to repeat it as many times as many parallax layers you have. Add the interaction, select the corresponding variable, add the expression with the corresponding strength. Pay attention here, because it's easy to slip and select the wrong variable. You can use the auto-suggest feature to ensure you're selecting the correct variable. Just type the number of the layer, and you'll see the list of all related variables. You probably noticed that all this time we've been working with only the half of the frame for positive direction of the cursor, and now it's time to cover the other half. Luckily, we can take a shortcut here. Copy the auto layout with columns, drag it to the left and flip it horizontally. Now just at the other half, it starts with the smallest value at the center and increases to the sides. But these are still positive values, and we need the negative ones. Instead of going through every column and adding a minus to the expression, here's a simple trick. Add another expression that sets cursor x to negative cursor x and drag it right below the first one. This way, all the following expressions will use the inverted value. Then group both halves, set constraints to scale, lock it, and we're done with horizontal tracker. Let's move on to the vertical. First, we need to create a component that consists of two transparent variants and connect them with the while hovering interaction. Then grab a copy of the default variant, turn it into a row, and then basically repeat everything we did before, but using frame height variable and y coordinates. I'll just briefly show you the steps instead of going through the whole process again, so feel free to pause the video and continue when you're ready. The worst part is over. If you manage to pull off every step before, the next one will be the child's play for you. We are gonna create the parallax layers. Create a frame, apply frame width and frame height variables to it, make as many copies as many layers you need, 5 total in this case, and turn them into components. Also rename them with descending numbers and disable clip content. Then I'm gonna drop here these images I've created using Midjourney and Photoshop. I won't cover how I made them in this video, it's not the point here, but let me know in the comments if you're interested in the follow-up tutorial. For now, you can just use simple shapes or text, like in this example. Place your images or shapes in components. We're gonna start with the background and move towards the foreground, so grab the last component and copy it into the parent frame. Apply auto layout, remove annoying default values, and align it to top left. Switch paddings to individual and apply layer X and layer Y variables from the layer 5 group to left and top paddings correspondingly. This is the hack that allows us to move the layers, since we can't change their position with variables in any other way. Now duplicate it and replace the instance inside with the next or rather previous one. Then replace variables for this layer as well. Rinse and repeat for all layers. And finally, let's set the strength of the effect for each layer. There is no universal set of values as they depend on the content you have. But here's a simple rule. Smaller values mean slower movement, and negative values result in a movement in the opposite direction. From my experience, you will rarely need values bigger than 0.2. Here's the list of values for this particular image. And here are values for other examples from the intro. You may also find them in my file. There is just one last problem we need to fix. As the layers move, we can see their cropped edges. All we need to do is scale them up a little. The faster the layer moves, the more you need to scale it. It may take a couple attempts to get it right, as again, there are no exact values and they highly depend on your image. And of course, you don't have to scale them if there are no visible edges. And that's it. I hope you learned something useful today, and I'll see you in the next one.